I'm tempted to say, friends and colleagues, that having heard myself introduced, I can hardly wait to hear myself speak. Whether you'll feel the same way at the end of my remarks is, of course, a matter for legitimate speculation and conjecture. But let me say at the outset, before I say anything else of any substance or quality, whatever, that I'm very conscious of the low esteem, bordering upon opprobrium, in which politicians seem to be held these days. Though, of course, as you as academics will know, there is a considerable body of evidence to suggest that although people think that politicians as a breed are useless or worse, they very often entertain, particularly if they have come to know him or her, a much higher opinion of their own local member of Parliament. Nevertheless, I don't seek to ignore or diminish the significance of our unpopularity and the accompanying challenge over a period to try to stem and reverse it. What, however, I think I am entitled to say, possibly clutching at straws, is that even though we are currently poorly regarded, I can say with certainty that MPs today are more polite towards and interested in the views of their constituents than was the case in 1714, when one Anthony Henley was a member of Parliament. Now, I'm not going to seek to hoodwink you, ladies and gentlemen, for two reasons. First, it would be unethical. Secondly, it would be doomed amongst this cerebral group to fail. So I'm not going to commit the abiding sin of the politician, which is to exaggerate. I'm not going to suggest to you that Anthony Henley was a household name in British politics in 1714, for he was not. Indeed, the more acerbic of his detractors were wont to suggest that Anthony Henley was not even a household name in his own household. But he was a member of Parliament in 1714, and in that year he received a letter from a group of his gentleman constituents urging him to vote against the budget, or as it was commonly known in the lexicon of the time, against the excise, to which I kid you not, this is not an apocryphal story, it's the gospel truth. Anthony Henley responded in writing thus: "Gentlemen, I have received your letter about the excise, and I am surprised at your insolence in writing to me at all. You know and I know that I bought this constituency. You know and I know that I am determined to sell it. And you know what you think I don't know, that you are now looking out for another buyer. And I know what you personally don't know, which is that I have found another constituency to buy. About what you said about the excise, may God's curse alight upon you all, and may it make your homes as open and as free to the excise officers, as your wives and daughters have always been to me when I represented your rascally constituency." Now, ladies and gentlemen, I always encourage neophyte MPs today to resist any temptation to deploy that historical anecdote in front of their executive council in the Tory party or its equivalent in the CLP, and to deploy it, if deploy it they must at all, only when they're safely into what they expect and plan to be their last session of Parliament before retirement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you from the bottom of my heart for having me, and let me say two words of thanks, which I think are richly deserved. First, to the Political Studies Association, and passion for political science and the practice of politics, which I hugely esteem. And I think the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Department of Political Theory and Institutions at the University of Sheffield by the late and great Bernard Crick is one hell of an anniversary, so far as all of us believing in, committed to, wanting to foster interest in politics are concerned. And the fact that there is the associated anniversary of the 21st year of the Journal of Legislative Studies is no insignificant anniversary either. All part and parcel of a serious commitment to the promotion of informed interest in politics. It's so much easier to rubbish a discipline or an institution or a vocation and to point to its shortcomings or the inadequacies of its practitioners, to the fact of the glass being half empty. And for my part, it seems to me that a part, and I admit only a part, of the recovery of a belief in politics would be a sincere and uncompromising advocacy of the merits of politics by those who are in one form or another engaged in it, not blind to our weaknesses or insensitive to the legitimate criticisms that can be levelled at us, but equally not inclined simply to bend the knee and accept every darn fool misrepresentation of what politics is or politicians are about. So my first tribute is to the PSA, to the study of government at Sheffield University, and to that magnificent legacy. And that is no rhetorical excess. That magnificent legacy of Bernard Crick as someone who thought of the study of politics as not something that should be confined to an ivory tower, but something which should be spread well beyond the institution of the university, and which ought to be able, if taught with love and passion, to be able to act as a catalyst for a wider public engagement with politics, especially though not exclusively among young people. And the second tribute that I want to express, and I feel confident that I'll do so with some enthusiastic support from this audience, is to someone whom I've come to know especially well over the last 7 or 8 years, and with whom I have served in Parliament for 18, who himself has served in Parliament for 28, and who has a 45-year track record of public service in politics, as an exemplar, as a facilitator of improved lives, and as a role model for other people across the field of public service. And that person, whom I invite you to join me in welcoming and congratulating, is David Plunkett. Matt's kindly reference, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that some worthwhile things have happened. I would like to think, looking back over the last Parliament, that in two respects of notable interest to this audience, improvements have been secured. Put very simply and pithily, because I don't intend to dwell upon them tonight, improvement in scrutiny, which is the foremost responsibility of Parliament, and improvement in public engagement, which might not historically have been regarded as a principal challenge for Parliament, but which I think a proper rounded appreciation of our public responsibility would now suggest needs increasingly to be to the fore. The combination of greater urgency in questioning in Parliament, the stellar performances of a litany of select committees under their inspired chairs' leaderships, and the very focused and in some cases agenda-changing activity of the Backbench Business Committee have all made their mark. And in terms of public engagement, ladies and gentlemen, it's a partnership. I can do a bit in terms of substantial numbers of visits around the country and interactive engagement with audiences through the use of technology and in-reach welcoming organisations into Parliament and Speaker's House on a scale greater than in the past. But I think too what you have done, what we've done together through the universities programme, the link up between universities and Parliament, the growth of the Parliamentary Studies module to now, I think, 20 institutions across the country duly accredited, are all part of the process of trying to foster and nurture a better, closer, more understanding relationship between the academic world on the one hand and Parliament on the other, with wider benefits in terms of the numbers of people who feel some sort of engagement with our institution, including, and very strikingly, the UK Youth Parliament. I'm very proud of the fact that they hold their debates in our chamber on a non-sitting Friday as a result of the decisions of the House of Commons on the one hand and their willingness to engage on the other. And why do I go to the UK Youth Parliament annual general meeting, wherever it is in the UK, every year? I'll keep on going if they keep on inviting me, for one very simple reason, of which I think Bernard Crick would have approved. And that is that if we in Parliament want to be respected by young people, we have to show some respect for young people. Respect is not an automatic right. Respect is an earned entitlement. Or to put it another way, respect is a two-way street. But I think that in politics, as in sport, as in business, complacency is always the biggest enemy. And if you're at any point close to feeling satisfied with your efforts or outcomes, you are probably on a slippery slope. The truth is that in politics, I think, probably, as in business and in sport, you very rarely stand still. You are either innovating and devising, conceiving of new ideas, new approaches, new targets, or you will, in due course, if not actively, at any rate, regress and go backwards, because other people will be doing that. So I certainly don't want to exude any sense of smug self-satisfaction for which there wouldn't be an ounce of justification. We have a kind of forward agenda amongst colleagues in Parliament. It's not for me to script, but I think that quite a lot of people broadly identify with it, which I sought to articulate in a recent speech to the Hansard Society. And I think it's a mixture of bolstering scrutiny, facilitating engagement, and making sure that the House of Commons, this may seem an inward-looking point, but it's quite relevant, is itself better managed. And if I were to summarise key features of those different targets for the next Parliament, I would say this. In terms of the bolstering of scrutiny, but more particularly the sense that the House owns its own agenda, probably the biggest piece of unfinished business. There's lots of other stuff. Scrutiny of European legislation, how public bill committees are put together, and a vicinity of other things. But I think probably I would say trying to revive the commitment to establish a House Business Committee would be a big advance in the next Parliament. My own view is that it would be much better if government business, and government is entitled to get its business, were scheduled and timetabled, not behind the scenes in a rather ancient and untransparent manner, simply by government business managers, but by some sort of House Business Committee in which the government may very well legitimately have a majority, but on which the opposition, smaller parties, and in particular backbenchers could themselves be represented. So I hope that will happen in the next Parliament, because it was supposed to happen in this, but unfortunately the Coalition's commitment to introduce such a House Business Committee in the third year of the Parliament didn't happen. It should after the election. Secondly, some of you may be aware, Matt Flinders gave great support to this, that in the back end of 2013 I announced the intended creation of a Digital Democracy Commission, which conducted its work between January 2014 and January 2015. And we charged ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, with looking at 5 questions. How, through the embrace of technology, can we legislate better? How, through the embrace of technology, can we scrutinise better? How, through the embrace of technology, can we represent better? How, through the use of technology, can we engage better with civil society? And how, through the use of technology, can we facilitate the better engagement of members of civil society with each other? And the medium was the message. Much of the work was done interactively. It was undertaken within existing budgets. No vast spend took place, but we did get evidence from a very wide variety of sources, including people who hadn't previously engaged with the political process at all, and that, of course, was part of our intention. And we did come up with a number of quite straightforward, but perhaps worthwhile ideas about what we needed to do to tackle the degree of disengagement from politics over the next 5 years. It wouldn't be a bad idea to start by saying everybody by 2020, as a result of better use of technology, mass communication, should know what it is that the House of Commons does. It might not be a bad start to say that all of our data should be available in future as open data in formats suitable for reuse. In other words, parliamentary information should be capable of being presented much more simply and intelligibly to the outside world, and dare I say it, interactively, so that people who want to engage with what Parliament is doing don't have to spend hours finding deep in the innards of the institution a report or a development or a policy with which they wish to familiarise themselves. And Christina Leston-Bandera served, she's from Hull University, magnificently on that commission. I'm no expert on these matters. I needed advice from people who do understand the interrelationship, current and potential, between technology and politics. And we floated the possibility that perhaps everybody should have the opportunity, subject to the integrity of the ballot, which is clearly imperative, to vote online in subsequent elections if they so wish. We shall that concept that we cannot simply allow ourselves to fall light years behind the advance of technology is pretty important if the estrangement between the political class and the electorate is not to be exacerbated rather than minimised. And I also think that it's a worthwhile part of our agenda for the future to say that a modern institution called Parliament needs its top quality clerks, its specialist proceduralists to advise it on undertaking its scrutiny function. But on the law of averages, ladies and gentlemen, it is unlikely that the greatest top-flight procedural specialist would also have topped the class at the Harvard Business School. And the person who would best advise us on procedural matters is not particularly likely to be the best placed to manage a large public institution called Parliament, which, as well as being a scrutineer and a representative body, is also a World Heritage Site, a large-scale employer, and a deliverer of services. And that's why I made the apparently, in some people's minds, heretical, but in my view, valid proposition, that actually what the House should have is both top-quality proceduralists sticking to their last, that is to say, focusing upon what they, and probably only they, know best, and high-quality management ensuring that our status in the future as a well-refurbished building, an employer of people and a deliverer of services can be underscored. That said, I missed one thing, which I deliberately left till last, that I would like to float with you. And in the end, it's not for me to decide, it's, I suppose, for Parliament to decide, but Parliament, in deciding, should take some heed of what other people think. I've talked about all the good things I think have happened in Parliament in recent years: the intensity of questioning, the great backbench opportunity, the power and efficacy of the select committees, the transformative work of the Backbench Business Committee, and some of the debates that have taken place under its auspices. Yet, if truth be told, though there is some Ansar Society audit of political engagement work that suggests an increase, quite a strikingly significant increase of the proportion of people who think that Parliament is better holding the government to account, possibly partly because of the coalition, but also because of the institutional changes that I've described, there is one big problem in my view. Maybe others, but there's one big problem. And that is that by a huge multiple, the thing about Parliament that more people see and hear than anything else is not the work of select committees or of the Backbench Business Committee, or even of urgent questions, the growth of which, as probably most of you will know, I've hugely encouraged. The thing people see or hear by a huge multiple more of Parliament than anything else is Prime Minister's questions. And I would just like to put it to you that I've always had an uneasy dialogue with journalists on this subject because, and I say this non-pejoratively, but I think correctly, a mixed message in the media is a message doomed to fail. The media always love a simple, clear, yes or no, right or wrong, black or white answer to everything. There is no room for a shade of grey or nuance. And I'm occasionally asked, well, isn't it true that you hate Prime Minister's questions? And my answer is, no, I don't hate Prime Minister's questions, ladies and gentlemen. I've lost count of the number of places I've visited in which people around the world, speakers, ministers, backbenchers, have said to me, we wish in our country, our Prime Minister had to come to Parliament each week, as yours does. From which it follows, perhaps, understandably, that I do not object to the idea, it would make much difference if I did, but I do not object to the idea of a Prime Minister's questions. It seems to me that the case for having a Prime Minister's questions is compelling. But, and there is a but, when the decibel level that Prime Minister's questions causes deep purple, which was undeniably the loudest band in the world in the 1970s, to be regarded as positively sotto voce, my proposition is simply that we are spray painting our shop window. This is what people see and hear, and they don't, frankly, like it very much. Now, we're not the Oxford Union, and we're certainly not a group of Trappist monks, and to some extent, 'twas ever thus, though of course it didn't used to be televised, and televising a Parliament is a good thing, and in any case, it is an irreversible thing. But the fact is that the bedlam, the orchestrated barricade, the cacophony of noise are witnessed by huge numbers of people. And I just want to put this to you. Reputationally, it is, and I am saying it in a very understated way, adverse for Parliament, point one. Point two, preparation for the Prime Minister of the Opposition duel takes up an enormous amount of time of each of the protagonists every week. Point three, the character of the exchange and the often excessive robustiousness mean that a lot of important issues perhaps don't get aired as effectively as they might. Now, it may be that you'll say, oh, I don't agree with you, I think we should just leave it as it is. And if that's what Parliament decides, I'm Parliament's servant, and I'm very conscious of that, and so be it. But in this gathering, people who care about politics, I'm just floating to you and wanting to cause you to think about this, and maybe even some of you to undertake academic work in relation to the subject. The idea that maybe it could be done differently or better. Maybe it would be better if the balance between Leader of the Opposition questions to the PM and backbenchers questions were readjusted. Maybe it would be better if instead of having half an hour for the session, we have an hour for the session. Maybe it would be better, you lose the spontaneity, but you might gain in terms of the meaningful character of the exchanges. It would be better if either all of the questions or some of them, perhaps an agreed proportion, could be questions of which the Prime Minister did have advance notice, as with most ministerial question types, about all other than PM questions, with the opportunity, sure, for the PM to give an initial answer based upon research and knowledge, but with the opportunity for the backbench member then to come back with a supplementary, as in all other ministerial question time sessions. And maybe, in addition to some of those possible reforms that I float, there could be merit in having, alongside the Prime Minister's questions, a PQ team. So you've got your PMQs, and you have your PQT, which would be short for public question time, in which the Prime Minister submitted him or herself to questioning by members of the public, independently chosen and overseen by, say, the Electoral Reform Society, or dare I say it, wishing to big up the role of my distinguished hosts, the Political Studies Association. I want to leave you with those perhaps dry but well-intentioned thoughts, because I do love Parliament. Like David, I'm passionate about the place. I think it can be the home of skullduggery, but it can also be the theatre for the expression, the championing, and the triumph of great causes. But if, as a result of a very unrepresentative part of the Parliamentary week, getting massive and on the whole unfavourable attention. We are effectively reinforcing the low esteem in which we are held. There must surely be a case for openly and fearlessly considering how we might do it differently and better. So I think it's a mixture, is it not? As perhaps we should always strive for in life. Some sense of pride in the good things that we're doing, and some very clear-headed recognition that there is a lot more to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I have always considered myself very lucky. I always go around saying to school audiences, and indeed university audiences for that matter, that I've no plans to die tomorrow. But if I were to die tomorrow, I would die happy, because I think I'm incredibly lucky to do for a living, which I think you do as academics, to do for a living what you enjoy. In my case, 2 jobs, MP for Buckingham and Speaker of the House, is the most enormous privilege. No one should try to do any job forever. But as far as I'm aware, I'm in perfectly good health. And I'm 52. And if the House of Commons is content for me to continue as Speaker, I would love to do so, subject to my immediate and pressing commitment after I leave Sheffield in the morning. That is to go to my constituency in Buckingham, because all politics is local. And unless you've got a seat when the music stops in politics, you are nothing. So at risk of being rather selfish and inward-looking for a moment in conclusion, my immediate priorities after here and this wonderful event are to go to Buckingham and try to get myself re-elected to Parliament. I love representing my constituency and I'd like to go on doing so. And then if it's at all possible, I'd like to continue as Speaker of the next Parliament, because I still think there's a hell of a lot to do. And I'd like to think that at least a considerable proportion of that can be done by useful and productive, public-spirited cooperation between people like me and people like you. This has been a huge joy and a privilege for me, and although you're incredibly polite, you probably